palace in Borderland has some of the craziest deaths. From people cutting off their own limbs to having their heads exploded, here are the 10 worst deaths in the show so far. The Unnamed Man. The journey into the harsh reality of the Borderlands begins with a sharp, immediate lesson in compliance. After Arisu, Kurubi, and Chota narrowly survive their first game, the deceptively simple Dead or Alive, they stand bewildered in the empty streets of Tokyo. Alongside the pragmatic Shibuki, they have just received their 3-day visas, a temporary reprieve that feels more like a leash than a lifeline. In this initial state of shock, the rules of their new existence are still terrifyingly vague. It's in this fragile moment that a new figure appears, a man whose frantic energy cuts through their manic confusion. He is a portrait of pure desperation, his visa set to expire that very day. Unlike the newcomers, he has experienced enough of this world to be broken by it. He declares loudly that he is done, that he refuses to play another game. It is a cry of defiance that comes from absolute despair, an attempt to reclaim some agency in a world that has stripped him of all control. His rebellion is met with a cold, terrifying indifference from the world around him. In this new game world, there is no bargaining or reasoning with the game masters. A single pencil-thin beam of red light descends from the sky. There is no heads up, no warning, just a pinpoint of light that strikes him with surgical precision. The man doesn't scream or explode, his life simply ends on the spot. He is erased from existence in an instant, a human being deleted by an unseen operator with no negotiation or civility. The group is stunned into silence by the suddenness of it all. It's an execution devoid of passion or anger, as impersonal as a man annoyingly swatting a pesky fly. Shibuki, the veteran of this world, wastes no time in verbalizing the horrific truth they have just witnessed. "You have to keep playing," she says, "if you want to live." Her words solidify the lesson taught by the laser. This game is entertainment, and if you pull the plug on somebody's favorite messed up show, they'll quickly ensure you pay the price. This death, while not the goriest, is one of the worst because of what it represents. It is the moment the cage door slams shut. It establishes the core, unbendable rule of the Borderlands. Participation is not optional. Despair, surrender, and defiance are all met with the same immediate, automated annihilation. It's a chilling welcome to their new reality, a promise that the only way out is through the games, or through a quick, silent death from above. Momoka Manami. The Ten of Hearts game, The Witch Hunt, was designed to be a masterclass in psychological destruction. Staged within the supposed sanctuary of the beach, it began with a simple, horrifying discovery in the form of the body of a young woman, Momoka Manami, stabbed through the chest. The game's objective was to identify her killer, the witch, and burn them in a fire of justice. This premise instantly lit a fuse of paranoia in an already tense community. The game quickly devolved into a bloodbath. Aguni, the militant new leader of the beach, saw the chaos as an opportunity. He and his followers began a campaign of indiscriminate slaughter, killing residents and throwing them onto the pyre with the grim hope that one of them might be the witch. The community turned on itself, with accusations flying and friendships dissolving under the intense pressure of survival. The beach became a slaughterhouse, its promise of safety revealed as a cruel joke. Amidst the carnage, Arisu struggled to think like a game master. He analyzed the setup, the timing, and the twisted psychology at play. Through a process of elimination and a key insight into the nature of Hearts games, he arrived at a staggering conclusion. The witch wasn't a murderer, hiding in the crowd. The game was far more insidious than that. He revealed the truth to the horrified survivors. Momoka Manami herself was the witch. She had taken her own life, stabbing herself to become the victim and the killer simultaneously. It was a perfect diabolical trick designed to make them tear each other apart in search of a phantom culprit. The real enemy wasn't a person, but the suspicion and fear the game had planted in their hearts. Just as this horrifying truth settled, the tragedy deepened. Asahi, Momoka's friend, stepped forward, overcome with guilt. She confessed that they were both dealers, game facilitators who helped orchestrate the games in exchange for longer visas. Momoka's suicide wasn't just a choice, it was her job. For revealing this ultimate secret, Asahi was immediately executed by a laser from the sky, her death underlining the game's true, layered cruelty. Momoka's death was therefore a suicide, an assassination, and an act of occupational hazard all at once, a psychologically devastating end that catalyzed the destruction of dozens of other lives. What makes her death really impactful is that she chose to take her own life rather than kill a fellow player, knowing that they were all there without wanting to be, and that they were just trying to survive for one more day. Hatter. Hatter was the charismatic, tyrannical king of the beach. He built a utopia in the heart of the Borderlands, a vibrant community where players could pool the playing cards they won from games. The collective goal, he claimed, was to gather all the cards and send one person back to the real world. He ruled with a simple but terrifying mantra: wear a swimsuit, surrender all cards, and death to all traitors. His leadership was a blend of poolside parties and brutal executions. Beneath the surface of this paradise, however, a deep rot had set in, poisoning the one relationship that should have been its bedrock. Aguni, his oldest and closest friend, watched in horror as the Hatfluencer transformed into a warped monster. The power he found on the beach corrupted him absolutely. He became paranoid and violent, murdering his own followers for daring to hide cards from him. The man Aguni had once respected was gone, replaced by a ruthless dictator. The friendship finally shattered when Hatter's visa was running low, forcing him to attend another game. Before he left, Aguni confronted him, declaring his intent to leave the beach. He could no longer stand by and watch his friend's descent into madness. According to Hatter's own ironclad rule, this made Aguni a traitor, and the punishment was death. It was a moment of truth for both men. Hatter, fully embodying the tyrant he had become, raised his gun to execute the man who was once like his brother. But Aguni was faster. He fired first, a single shot that ended the confrontation and their friendship forever. The act was one of self-preservation, but it was weighted with the immense tragedy of what they had lost. Hatter was carried back to the beach, bleeding out from a mortal wound inflicted by his best friend. His reign ended not in a blaze of glory, but with a quiet, tragic defeat. This death is brutal not for its gore, but for its emotional impact. It was the tragic climax of a friendship destroyed by power, a mercy killing that felt like a betrayal. Hatter's death created a power vacuum that plunged the beach into the violent chaos of the witch hunt, proving that his final, broken legacy was just as destructive as his rule. The Tagger. The 5 of Spades game, known simply as Tag, introduced a new level of terror for the players. The game took place in a sprawling, dilapidated apartment complex, and the objective sounded simple enough: avoid being tagged by the player who is it, while searching for a hidden symbol to clear the game. The brutal twist, however, was that the Tagger was not another frightened contestant trying to touch you and pass on the roll, but a silent, menacing figure in a horse mask, armed with a submachine gun, whose sole goal was to shoot you to ensure their own survival. This wasn't a game of schoolyard tag. It was a genuine hunt. The horse-masked Tagger moved with a cold, terrifying efficiency, systematically gunning down participants who were too slow or unlucky enough to bump into him with nowhere else to run. He was an unstoppable force of nature, transforming the decaying building into his personal hunting ground. The atmosphere was one of pure dread, as the players realized they weren't just playing against each other, but against a dedicated killer. The remaining survivors, including Arisu, Kurubi, Usagi, and the militant Aguni, were forced to make a stand. They knew they couldn't simply outrun him forever. While Arisu and Usagi focused on finding the game's objective, Kurubi and Aguni engaged the Tagger in a direct and brutal physical confrontation. It was a desperate fight, but they managed to overpower the gunman just as Arisu and Usagi cleared the game. Their victory, however, was short-lived. As soon as the game was declared over, a collar fastened around the Tagger's neck beeped and exploded, killing him instantly. In the quiet aftermath, Kurubi discovered the Tagger's phone, which displayed the same game over message as their own devices. In that single, horrifying moment, the entire nature of their world shifted. The monster they had fought so hard to defeat was not a game master or a demon. He was just another player, exactly like them, forced into the role of the antagonist. The brutality of this death lies not in the violent, sudden explosion of the collar, but in the insane psychological gut punch of this revelation. It proved that the lines between victim and villain were meaningless in the Borderlands, and that even their most terrifying enemies were just pawns in a larger, more sinister game. Kuzuryu Kaichi. As the King of Diamonds, Kuzuryu Kaichi was the architect of one of the most psychologically punishing games in the Borderlands. A former lawyer who had become deeply cynical about the inherent value of human life, he designed the Beauty Contest to be a reflection of his cold, utilitarian worldview. It was a game of logic and prediction, where players were eliminated and dissolved in sulfuric acid, a fate he observed with detached indifference. The game's climax saw him in a final showdown with Chishiya, a player whose seemingly irrational and whimsical choices baffled Kuzuryu's logical mind. With both men at -9 points, the next round was a life or death proposition. One would live, and one would be melted away by the acid slowly dripping into the scales above their heads. It was in these final tense moments that Kuzuryu's cynical armor began to crack. He was haunted by a memory of Momoka, the witch from the beach. He had once asked her why she would choose a role that guaranteed her death. She told him she did it to follow her own ideals, to not let a game master decide her fate, and to stop the cycle of players killing each other. Her words about the value of the human heart had planted a seed of doubt in his soul. In the final round, Chishiya again made an illogical move, choosing the number 100 and effectively handing the victory and his life to Kuzuryu. It was an act of trust, or perhaps of sheer resignation, that forced Kuzuryu to make a choice that went beyond game theory. Moved by Moka's memory and Chishiya's baffling display of humanity, Kuzuryu chose the number 0. He deliberately lost the game. He explained to a stunned Chishiya that he was doing it to follow his own ideals for the first time, to exit the world without the guilt that had defined his existence. As Chishiya was declared the winner, the scale above Kuzuryu tipped. A bucket of sulfuric acid was poured down upon him, and he was killed instantly. His death was a horrific spectacle, a complete dissolution. But at the same time, it was also a deep act of redemption. In his final moment, the cynical King of Diamonds chose his own end, reclaiming a piece of his humanity at the cost of his own life. A brutal but meaningful conclusion to his story. Kyuma and his team, The King of Clubs game contrasts to the paranoia and betrayal of many other games. It was a contest of teamwork, strategy, and mutual respect. Arisu's group found themselves facing off against the King of Clubs, Ginji Kyuma, and his tight-knit band of friends. Kyuma was an anomaly in the Borderlands, a musician and philosopher who embraced a philosophy of living life to its fullest, famously practicing nudism as a form of freedom. He and his team were not sadistic killers, but fellow citizens of this world who fought with honor and a powerful sense of camaraderie. The game was a grueling battle of wits and endurance, a high-stakes game of tag where points were won and lost through physical contact and clever positioning. Kyuma and his friends were formidable, pushing Arisu's team to their absolute limits and forcing them to work together in ways they never had before. The game's conclusion was incredibly tense. Thanks to a heroic and gruesome sacrifice from their teammate, which we'll talk about later, Arisu's group managed to secure a razor-thin 500-point lead just as the 2-hour timer expired. There was no last-minute trick, no final betrayal. It was a clean, hard-fought loss for the King's team. Kyuma and his friends accepted their defeat with a grace that was both stunning and heartbreaking. There was no anger, no blame. They gathered together, proud of the way they had played and lived. In his final moments, Kyuma stood atop a shipping container and shared a moment of genuine connection with Arisu, whom he, at this point, considered a friend. He urged Arisu to live his life on his own terms, a final piece of advice from a worthy adversary. Then the game's cold, impersonal consequence was delivered. A series of red lasers descended from the sky, one for each member of Kyuma's team. They faced their end together, standing proudly as they were systematically executed. The brutality of this mass execution isn't just in the sudden death. The audience, like Arisu, had grown to respect and even admire Kyuma and his strange philosophy. Watching this vibrant, honorable team get wiped out in a silent, orderly fashion was devastating. A soul-crushing reminder that in the Borderlands, even the best of men are subject to the merciless rules of the game. Kurubi and Chota. No death in Alice in Borderland hits with the same emotional force as the loss of Arisu's best friends. The Seven of Hearts game, Hide and Seek, was a diabolical piece of psychological engineering. Its rules perfectly crafted to shatter even the strongest of bonds among even the closest of friends. Arisu, Kuruba, Chota, and Shibuki were trapped in a vast botanical garden, with one assigned the role of the wolf and the other 3 as lambs. The only player to survive would be the one holding the title of wolf when the timer hit 0. The role of the wolf, the ticket to survival, could be passed to another player simply by making eye contact. This insidious mechanic instantly turned a game of hiding into a desperate hunt for your own friends. The years of deep friendship between Arisu, Kurubi, and Chota evaporated under the immense pressure, replaced by suspicion, fear, and bitter accusations. The game brought out their worst instincts as they fought over who deserved to live. As the clock ticked down, the raw anger and panic began to subside, replaced by a wave of profound regret. Hiding from each other in the lush greenery, they were flooded with memories of their life together before the Borderlands, the easy laughter and unconditional support that had defined their friendship. The realization of what they were about to lose was more painful than the fear of the game itself. In the final minutes, Arisu was the wolf, putting him in a position he never wanted. If he were to win, his friends would die, and he'd be alone forever. Overwhelmed with despair, he ran, not to secure his victory but to find his friends, unable to bear the thought of condemning one of them to die. He wanted to give up, to let someone else take the burden from him. With only seconds left, his friends made the decision for him. Kurub stepped out from his hiding place, standing in plain view of Arisu, but he kept his head down, refusing to make eye contact, a silent final act of love and sacrifice. Chota remained hidden, doing the same. The timer reached 0. The collars around the necks of Kurube, Chota, and Shibuki exploded. Arisu survived, but his world was destroyed. He was left screaming, completely alone, in a beautiful garden that had become a graveyard. The brutality of this moment is not in the violence, but in the silent, selfless choice his friends made in the name of their beautiful friendship. It is a death that fundamentally breaks Arisu, a wound that fuels his entire journey and defines the profound loss at the heart of the series, the King of Spades. The King of Spades was not merely a game master, he was a direct abuser of violence, a deathbringer, a walking embodiment of death delivered from afar through his rifle. From the moment the face card games were announced, he became a constant, terrifying presence in the city. A silent, masked man cloaked in black, he roamed the streets with an assault rifle, gunning down any player unlucky enough to cross his path. His playing grounds were the city itself, and the only objective was to survive his relentless, indiscriminate hunt. His reign of terror could not be cleared with a simple puzzle or a clever trick. His death required a war. The final confrontation was a desperate, all-out assault planned by the battered but united survivors, including Arisu, Usagi, Kuina, Aguni, and Chishiya. Their plan was to lure him into a drugstore they had rigged with explosives, but executing that plan was a near-suicidal endeavor. The battle was a brawl of brutal, close-quarters combat. The king proved to be far more than just a marksman. He was a master tactician and a seemingly unstoppable physical force. He shot Mommy Ann, leaving her for dead. He stabbed both Kuina and Usagi, taking them out of the fight. He engaged Aguni in a savage hand-to-hand brawl that left both men battered and bloody. In a breathtaking moment of sacrifice, Akane, a skilled archer, threw herself in front of Aguni to shield him from a barrage of bullets, absorbing the deadly impact with her own body. Even with the combined efforts of the entire team, the King of Spades seemed invincible, a relentless machine of destruction. The fight reached its climax when an enraged Aguni, fueled by a desire to protect his friends and end the nightmare, tackled the king and bodily threw him through the glass doors of the prepared drugstore. Trapped inside with his nemesis, Aguni screamed for Arisu to detonate the bomb. The resulting explosion was huge, engulfing the building in a fireball. Yet miraculously, both defenders were thrown clear of the wreckage, burned and broken, but still alive. The King of Spades, finally defeated, his body shattered, silently handed his gun to Aguni. It was a wordless request for the end. Aguni obliged, firing the final shot that executed the city's greatest menace. This death is one of the worst for its sheer, prolonged brutality. It was a very drawn-out, bloody, and agonizing end for the series' ultimate antagonist, a victory paid for with the blood and near-death experiences of every single survivor. Also, of everyone watching, only 1% is subscribed. So you guys better get it to at least 5%, otherwise, I don't know. Just please subscribe, thank you. Tatta. Tatta was a character defined by a cheerful optimism that often masked a deep-seated guilt. In his former life as a mechanic, a terrible mistake on his part had led to his superior's hand being grievously injured, an event that haunted him with a profound sense of failure. He carried this desire for atonement into the Borderlands, always eager to prove his worth and be useful to his new friends. His moment came during the final, desperate minutes of the King of Clubs game, Osmosis. Arisu's team was trailing, and defeat, which meant a mass execution by laser, seemed inevitable. It was then that Tatta, who had been assigned the seemingly minor role of guarding their base, conceived of a plan born from a loophole in the rules and an incredible threshold for pain. Arisu found him in a secluded shipping container, frantically and repeatedly smashing his own hand against the corrugated steel door. His goal was gruesome and desperate, to break the bones in his hand so thoroughly that he could slip his player bracelet off. Arisu was horrified and tried to stop him, but Tatta's conviction was absolute. This was his chance to finally do something right, to save everyone. Reluctantly, Arisu helped his friend complete the horrifying task. With his hand mangled and bloody, Tatta managed to remove the bracelet and give it to Arisu. Since Tatta had never been tagged, his bracelet still held his full 10,000 points. The transfer gave their team the lead just seconds before the game ended, securing their victory. It was a brilliant and heroic sacrifice, but the cost was fatal. Tatta had severed major arteries in the process and was bleeding out rapidly. There was no medical aid to be found in the desolate game arena. After their victory was announced, Arisu rushed back to his friend's side, but it was too late. All he could do was hold Tatta and thank him for his sacrifice as he died. Tatta's death is so brutal because it was self-inflicted, slow, and agonizingly deliberate. It was a conscious choice to destroy his own body, to endure unimaginable pain, all to redeem his past and save his friends. His quiet, bloody end is a horrific testament to the extreme lengths one might go to find peace. Benzo Yashiki. Our pick for the worst death in Alice in Borderland is not the quickest, nor the most emotionally heroic. It is a slow, methodical dismantling of a man's mind, followed by the complete and agonizing dissolution of his body. The King of Diamonds game, Beauty Contest, was staged in the sterile, imposing chamber of the Supreme Court, a fitting venue for a game that delivered such a cold and absolute form of justice. The rules were a masterpiece of psychological warfare. 5 players had to choose a number between 0 and 100. The average of all selected numbers was multiplied by 0.8, and the player closest to that result won. For every loss, a player received a negative point. Reaching -10 meant death by a vat of sulfuric acid, which would be slowly poured onto them from a scale suspended above their heads. Benzo Yashiki entered this arena as a man of supreme confidence. He was a creature of logic and calculation, certain that he could solve the game through mathematics. He fiddled with his fingers, his mind racing with equations, attempting to predict the rational choices of his opponents. To him, it was not a game of chance, but a complex problem with a definitive solution. His downfall was his inability to account for the one variable that cannot be calculated: human irrationality. He was repeatedly baffled by the actions of Chishiya, who would choose numbers like 100, a move guaranteed to lose, simply to disrupt the game's logic because he found it tiresome to worry. Yashige's formulas crumbled against such whimsical chaos. His cool, confident demeanor eroded with each lost round, replaced by beads of sweat and frantic, desperate calculations. By the 10th round, he was at -9 points. One more mistake would be fatal. He made his final choice, a desperate gamble based on broken logic. He lost. Terror washed over his face as the reality of his fate set in. The acid began to drip, hissing as it ate through the tablet at his station. He struggled against the restraints binding him to his chair, his pleas for mercy echoing in the silent courtroom. In his final horrifying moments, he was forced to watch as the player next to him, Asuma, was melted alive, his screams a prelude to Yashige's own end. His death was the ultimate torment, a complete intellectual humiliation, followed by a slow, agonizing, and inescapable physical destruction. It was the total annihilation of a man, mind and body, making it the most brutal death in the series. So these have been our picks for the worst deaths in Alice in Borderland. Do you agree with our list, or is there somebody we missed? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to see more Alice content and theories, click the video on screen now.